We have our next speaker, Dr. Peter Martinez, the chairperson of the South African Council for Space Affairs. He's also the director at the South African Astronomical Observatory in Cape Town. He is going to give his remarks today, especially focusing on the national aspects. I would like to call you, Dr. Martinez, to come.
Thank you, Lulu. Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to address you here this evening. This is a really historic occasion. Those of you who've been involved in organizing this event will know exactly what I mean, but perhaps for some of you who are, especially the younger folks, you may not realize that you are part of history in the making. And so, especially if you're under 30, I would suggest that you look to the left and to the right of you and remember who was sitting next to you this evening, because it is a historic date in the calendar of the African space arena. And for the older ones too, because a lot of us worked very hard to get to where we are at this point this evening. So we're all here to talk about space law, and space law is made possible by the activities in outer space. We are now 55 years into the space age. Hands up everyone who was born after 1957. Okay, so you are all part of what's known as the space generation. And the amazing thing is that very soon after the launch of Sputnik, on the 4th of October 1957, the major spacefaring powers at that time, the US and the Soviet Union, who were Cold War rivals, also realized that the competitive environment that the space allowed them to express their national rivalries in a non-belligerent way, but also it was a new environment that they were entering into. And so new legislation was created in a fairly short space of time. So we're now 55 years into the space age, and we've gone from an age where space was initially a dream. For thousands of years, people used to look up into the night sky and wonder what those points of light up there in space were. And in our time, those points of light have changed from being mystical sources up there, the objects of legends and so on, to places where people or human-built spacecraft go, and that's absolutely amazing. Spacecraft have visited over 90 worlds in the solar system, and the number will keep increasing, and I fervently hope that South Africa will play a part in the future exploration of outer space. The space has gone from being a dream to, in the first decade or so of the space age, to being a discretionary activity of those countries that could afford to explore the space environment, to a situation where we are now, where space is ubiquitous and it's absolutely essential to modern life. In fact, a day without space nowadays would be unimaginable, even for us living here in Africa. Space just occupies so many niches in our modern life that we just take totally for granted. If you had a day without space, you would have a day without weather forecasts, without satellite TV, without navigation, without being able to use your ATM card. Flights would be grounded, all sorts of navigation issues. The economies would suffer enormous losses. So that is the extent to which we have become dependent on outer space. Indeed, outer space got the three of us here to this event this evening, so we used the space system to navigate here. Unfortunately, the space system didn't tell us that we arrived an hour late. We thought we were coming at, we thought the event was starting at 7 and not at 6, so thank you very much for the patience, and Tare, thank you for jumping in at short notice to give the first talk this evening. So, we've gone from a situation where there were a few actors at the dawn of the space age, namely the two superpowers, to a situation these days where there are over 45 countries with national space agencies, and many more countries with satellites in outer space. And the diversity of actors has also increased. We're not only seeing states as being the actors in outer space, but also non-state entities, such as universities, private companies, and so on. So many more actors and much greater diversity. And this has led to concerns about sustainability of the outer space environment. This, if you go around and you talk to people in the international space arena, this is the biggest concern in outer space at the moment, is the sustainability of outer space activities because of the increasingly crowded, contested, and complex space environment. And of course, it is precisely in such an environment that lawyers thrive, because where you have the potential for accidents and so on, and so therefore you need to have the means to resolve disagreements in an amicable way by appealing to national and international legislation. The accidents that I'm speaking about are not just hypothetical. There are actually incidents that have happened already. In the late 70s, there was a satellite with a nuclear power source on board that re-entered the atmosphere over Canada, and that was the first test of the Liability Convention. And then much more recently, we've seen a collision in space. Cosmos, a Russian Cosmos satellite, defunct satellite, collided with an operational US Iridium satellite. So certainly the ground for developing space law is very, very fertile, both in the multilateral arena and also in the national legal arena. There are now lots of discussions in multilateral fora about developing things called rules of the road. So, for example, within the UN, there is a process to discuss the sustainability of space and developing guidelines to do that. There is another government group of experts. UNIDROIT is having these discussions. So this matter is being discussed in a number of places. And that's just the peaceful uses of outer space. We're not even talking about the potential militarization of outer space, which is also an area of great concern. Now, in terms of the development and codification of international space law, the leading body for this is the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, which is a standing committee of the United Nations, currently comprising 71 member states, soon to comprise 72. The latest request for membership coming from Costa Rica, I believe. Yes. And that is an indication of Costa Rica does not have a space agency. It just goes to show the importance that is attached to space systems by a growing number of countries around the world. This committee of the UN is responsible for developing and codifying space law, and it has two subcommittees, a legal and a scientific subcommittee, and I'm very pleased to see my colleague Tare Bresibe, who is the current chairperson of the legal subcommittee, here with us this evening, and very delighted that he availed himself to come and participate in this first African round of the Moot Court. In terms of the national context, South Africa has ratified the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, which is, in a sense, the Magna Carta of outer space law. We also ratified the so-called Rescue Convention, and much more recently, as January this year, we completed depositing the instruments of accession and ratification for the Registration Convention and the Liability Convention. So those are now all acceded to by South Africa. The Moon Agreement is still something that is under discussion.